First of all, can I congratulate all of you on the film and on the accolades that you have received to date, particularly at Venice and Toronto. Steve and Jeff, if I could start with you first of all, as writers, and without wishing to pigeonhole you in any way, your backgrounds are very different, one in comedy, one very much in drama. And I wondered, how that diversity served your collaboration, your first-time collaboration, in adapting Martin's book and in serving, I suppose, Philomena's story. Would you like to start, Jeff? Yeah, please.
I knew Steve a little bit before we worked on this, but I didn't encounter someone who was a comedy writer. I encountered someone who was fascinated and passionate about the story. And I would say the first 6 months before we even wrote a word was going over and over and over and over the story. The comedy came... I imagine he'd say the same. The comedy works best when it hangs off reality, when it hangs off a proper story. The one interesting thing about the process was being in the room with all the characters. That is the one great advantage of writing with Steve, because he's, amongst many other things, a brilliant mimic. And so at any given point, I was in the room with a nun, with Philomena, with Martin, and so that the dialogue was brilliant. I saw myself as someone holding a big net catching butterflies, which were lines and wonderful dialogue delivered in the style of the characters. That sounds all right to me. I'll go along with all that.
Brilliant bit. You liked that bit, didn't you?
Yeah, I did like the butterfly bit. Yeah, you should put that scarf back on. It suits the camp sort of talk of the butterflies. When Jeff, Christine Langham at the BBC, I have to thank her for introducing me to Jeff, because I said initially didn't want to write it. I said this is an interesting story, and I think I want to pursue it. And she said, and I told her what my take on the story would be to Christine, with my producer Gabby Tanner, who was the person who kicked me in the pants to get this all going. And we found when I told the story, Christine said, well, you should write it. And I said, well, I'm not really I'm used to writing comedy rather than drama. And she said, you just need someone good to write it with. And she introduced me to Jeff, and now we're bestest friends. And it was a real revelation, because I learned from him, and we collaborated in the true sense that we both brought different things to it. And Jeff would often talk about the structure of the thing and the rhythm of the whole piece. And I was more about the sort of myopic detail of character and dialogue. But we both had distinct roles, and but it was a real pleasure. I mean, writing, I think, is as much fun as acting, I think, because you're there at the genesis of things, and it's very exciting.
Thank you. And Judi, for you, what was the irresistible draw of this human interest story?
Well, I heard that Steve wanted to come and down to read it to me, and that's the first thing I heard of it through my agent, and he came and he read it to me, and immediately I wanted to do it before there was any really bits of tweaking to the script or anything that went on. I immediately wanted to do it because, well, you only have to hear the story and hear about Philomena Lee. That's irresistible to play. That's the really only thing that concerns me if I'm playing somebody who is alive, I played Iris Murdoch, who had not long died, and I felt the responsibility very heavy on my shoulders. And I feel with this film, as long as we tell Philomena's story and that we're true to her, which Jeff and Steve have already done by writing the story, but we must not sell her short. She's a most remarkable woman, and all my concern was that we should, that we must be absolutely true to her story, and that's, I hope. I know her, Philomena, because I met her before we started filming, but I haven't seen her since she's seen the film, so I can't wait for later today to hear actually what she feels.
From my point of view, when I I've played a handful of real people, including myself. When I played Martin, again, it was about. There's a certain amount of artistic license in the film. Certainly, the way we wrote it, Jeff and I wrote it. But the fundamentals, we were quite ethical, I think, about where we invented things and where we didn't. And what we were quite specific about was that the fundamental sort of facts of the story were intact and are true. And the way we rendered the characters was that it was okay if we took a little license here and there. Certainly with Martin, I'd say it's 60% Martin or 50% Martin, and there's about 30% me and 20% bits and bobs of something else. But the point is we honoured the characters in the way they're treated. I know because I've spoken to Philomena since she saw it, and she's very pleased with it. I think she's seen it twice now, in fact. And
see it 3 times tonight.
She'll see it 3 times tonight. And so the first time, I think she was concerned because, of course, anyone would be self-conscious watching someone portray part of their life on screen. But I think she was happy. She said, but the second time she saw it, she enjoyed it because she was watching it from knowing that she was dignified by the film.
We've been talking about the draw of the material. What was it for you that made you want to sign on and made this a bit of a no-brainer?
Well, it was a good story. And I always liked the double-sided thing that on top of this tragic story was what I kept calling a romantic comedy, or a sort of odd couple film. So I liked the challenge of doing both things at the same time. But it just always seemed very, very interesting and very moving and very funny. Good God, what more do people want?
I think because I'm Irish and because I was raised a Catholic, I felt like I had some license to talk about it and avoid the cliches, because there are a lot of cliches about faith and it's true. My family are still some of them are very devout Catholics, and I'm not. And in a way, I sort of wanted to, from a writing point of view, this was an opportunity to sort of address that in a grown-up way, and in a way that was very really wants to talk about sort of tolerance and understanding, and learning to live and love with people who have different points of view, I suppose. And that part of that, of course, part of that is where I'm from, in fact, I was raised a Catholic, and even though I'm not one now, I actually sort of think that a lot of the values I have were because of my religious upbringing, and things that I think are important, and I sort of I value very highly. But certainly, the my personal experience is part of that informed the dialogue.
The theme of forgiveness was very interesting. We started with it almost. We in talking to Philomena and her daughter Jane, we realised that Philomena had arrived at a point where she did truly forgive, and it wasn't forgiveness on an intellectual level, say as Lord Longford famously practiced forgiveness. Philomena's came from within. She really truly had forgiven those people that were caused so much misery in her life. Jane, who a bit like Steve, if I may, in a next generation Catholic, had a more modern, pragmatic view of the world, and she hadn't. And so we decided that that's how we would play the end, in that Philomena, this magnificent act of forgiveness, and Jane's point of view was represented with Martin. in that he, and I think it was also that was a way of venting what we felt the audience would feel at that point, in that they you know, there is an anger as a viewer watching it, and we felt that needed to be aired as a counterpoint.
Yeah, and also that we didn't want to be over prescriptive and say this is the correct way you should behave, so it was important to sort of articulate that and not to make everything sort of. We didn't want to wrap everything up very neatly with a bow at the end of the story. So we wanted to show that there was, you know, there wasn't a sort of a neat resolution, but there was a kind of a tolerant equilibrium that could be achieved in the lives of these characters.